Today, Thursday, August 8th, 2023, 10:30 in the morning. I am Rosemarie Polemi. I'm a volunteer at the Rocky Mountain Regional Veterans Medical Center. And I am going to be interviewing Mr. Brian Deasy for his Remembering Our Vets program video. So welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Okay, let's start off with, tell me a little bit about your childhood, where you were born, grew up, were you married, children, etc.
Sure. I was born in Presbyterian Medical Center in Manhattan, New York City, July 15th, 1943. I grew up, I don't remember the early days when you're 2 or 3, but I do remember living before I went to kindergarten, and that was in Hastings on Hudson, New York, which is about 10 miles from the Bronx line. And I remember I started school there. My mom and dad were divorced. My mom was raising myself, my brother Dan, and my sister Eileen, and we didn't have much. And we moved from a basement apartment, which I actually loved, to an apartment right on the New York Central Railroad tracks, which goes through Hastings on the Hudson, because you're only like 11 miles from the line of the city. And it was a you don't realize it as a kid how bad you have it till you get older. And no one in my family ever owned a house. My father walked out on what I thought was a beautiful person, left her with three kids to raise during World War II. He met another woman in Florida and wound up getting divorced. And I remember my mom used to get $35 a week, and that's what we lived on. And the apartment we moved to, I used to get a kick out of it because I spent 33 years in the Denver Police Department. And these kids in the projects would tell me, "Hey man, you don't know what it's like to be poor." And I would just smile at them and say, "You've got central heat in this building, right?" And they'd say, "Yes, we do." And I said, "I didn't even have that as a kid." My brother and I would go downstairs in the basement, and there were these 55-gallon drums that were laying laterally, and you would fill up an oil can with it, and it's like a kerosene base, and you would take it upstairs. We lived on the 3rd floor, and you'd take it upstairs and turn it upside down, and you'd hear the like just like you would a water jug in a water machine. And it would have a little copper tube that went into a stove, and there were 2 little wicks in there that burned. That was your heat. And then there was the blue bath routine that we had. My mom would boil water on the stove, and she had a gas stove, had a gas line, because years later we actually got a gas heater. But anyway, she would boil water on there, and my sister, being the oldest, God rest her, she would bathe first, and then my brother Dan, who was older, he would bathe, and I was the youngest, so and then I would bathe. And that's why I told my grandkids that's why it was a blue bath. And they said, because the color of the water? I said, exactly. I said, because when you're the 3rd one in, it's already blue and a little bit colder too. But I remember the cockroaches. We had terrible bed bug infestation one time that we had to get a bomb that you let off this aerosol giant can in this apartment, and it killed all of it. We used to get up, my brother and I, we slept in the same bed, and there was a little part between the mattress where you lay and the side, and it had a little tufted area there, and that's where they would hide in the daytime. And you'd have these bites on you, you'd get up in the morning and then scrape them and throw them out the window or whatever. But anytime Mrs. Clamp upstairs shook out her beds and all that stuff, then we got that in the roaches. But I didn't know I was poor as a kid. My mom worked 2 jobs her whole life. She was never there. My brother and I were little juvenile delinquents. I got arrested several times. By the time I was 12, I went before a judge and in Hastings on Hudson, and he told me one more time, and you're going to go to Lincoln Hall Reformatory. And me being the tough kid, I said, yeah, well, I can handle that. Well, I had a good friend of mine, Tommy Grady, told me, he said, if you go to Lincoln Hall, they're gonna do things to you that you're not gonna like. And he explained to me what would happen. it scared me straight. I mean, I've seen those shows on TV. From that day on, I never did anything more criminal. But I still got sent to work on a farm in Iowa. And at first, I hated it. My brother and I, we hated it because we left my mom. But in the long run, it was such an education. You take a kid from New York, he thinks all hamburgers come from the store. You don't realize there's a difference between a steer, a cow, a bull, a calf. They don't understand what blood spots are in eggs when you have to go get the chicken eggs out of the hen house. They don't know what geese do. They have no idea how nasty hogs can be and why they have a ring in their nose. You learn about soybeans, which I never even knew existed. We made 13 cents an hour cleaning soybeans. It was great. If you could work 10 hours, you could make $1.30. For $1.30, you could go to the store. You could get, oh my God, it was unlimited. You get 2 scoops of ice cream for a dime. And, okay, that was.
Time.
So anyway, I wind up graduating high school, and I apply to college, and I get into a New York State college, and I didn't want to go. It was I couldn't afford $750 every 6 months. So I had a friend of mine that graduated a year before, went to a little school in Kansas called Pittsburgh State. And it was a really big football school. But I got in there, and the tuition was $131 a semester, and my room was $42. So that was $173, if my math is correct, for 6 months. And all you had to do was feed yourself. Well, of course I went, and then my brother found out I was going to go, and they told him he wasn't college material. And it's so funny because I'm the one that quit college. He went to finish college and has a degree in physics and worked for the Atomic Energy Commission. So it's funny what people tell you what you can't do. But thank God I grew up in New York, in Hastings on the Hudson, where the education system was unbelievable. I realized that when I got in the military, how many people cannot do basic math, how many people do not know where Estonia is. They have no idea where Mount Rushmore is. They can't spell California, and they can't spell stairwell without assistance. It just shocked me. And I think, my God, what a great education I got. Then I found out years later that Hastings on the Hudson was 3rd in New York State for scholastically. And I thanked my teachers and stuff, and I went on to spend 8 years in the military.
So what motivated you to join the military?
I got tired of school. It wasn't for me. I was too adventurous. And my brother tried to talk me out of it and say, no, stay. And I had no purpose. But I had a brother-in-law in the Marine Corps at the time. He was already out, fought in the Korean War. And I came home at Christmas, and I went back, but then I told my mom in New York, I said, I'm not going to school anymore. I said, I'm going to go in the military. She said, what are you going to do? And I said, probably the Marine Corps. She said, oh, okay. So I came home in February 15th, or before that, it was like 2 weeks before, maybe February 1st. I went down to the recruiting office in Yonkers, which is like 2 miles from Hastings. And I got in this big building, and there were 4 recruiters, Navy, Army, Air Force, and Marine Corps. So I went to join the Marine Corps, and I walked in, and the Air Force guy was standing there. I said, how you doing? He says, good, son. He said, what can I do for you? And I said, I'm looking for the Marine recruiter. He said, well, him and the Army guy and the Navy guy are across the street right now eating lunch and having a beer. I said, oh, okay. I said, I'll wait. So he walks by, and he looks at me. He said, you graduate high school? I said, yes, sir. He said, you got any college? I said, yes, sir, a semester. He said, how'd you do? I said, yeah, I'm C's and B's. I said, I did all right. I got 13, 14 credits. He said, good. He said, have you ever thought about the Air Force? And I said, no, I'm going in the Marine Corps. He goes, oh, okay. He said, you probably couldn't pass our test anyway. And I was hooked. So I said, what? Don't talk to me like that. Like, I'll show you. Went and took the test. So I come home that night about 6 o'clock, and my mom is getting ready to go to her second job. She said, so when are you going to Paris Island, the Marine Corps? I said, no, I'm not, Mom. I'm going to San Antonio. And she said, why would you go to Texas? I said, because I joined the Air Force. She said, the what? I said, the Air Force. And I'm a firm believer now at 80 years old that when God closes one door, he opens another. And it's so true. It's so right on. So I wound up in the Air Force 8 years, But there's so many things in my life that happened coincidentally or so menial. And you look back and you reflect on that and say, if this doesn't happen, then this doesn't happen, you know? So,
It's,
yeah, so I
it's
joined.
so true. It's
Yeah,
so true.
yeah, exactly. I joined in 62. I got done with basic training probably February, March, April, probably the 1st of May, maybe the middle of May. And I wanted to be a medic. And in those days, you didn't have a choice. And they put me into air traffic control. And I thought, air traffic control, wow. And so I started, they sent me to Mississippi, to Keesler Field in Mississippi. And I started air traffic control school. I detested it. I hated it. I wanted nothing to do with it. I was doing fine. I went through 6 blocks, through civil air regulations and all that stuff. But I wanted something, I wanted to be able to help people. And I had this burning desire to be a medic. And that's what I wanted to be when I went in, because I figured I can help people, you know?
Mhm.
And it's that service motive drive, I think, psychologically that you have that I've tested for. And people say, you've had that for a long time, you know? Anyway, uh, I talked to a master sergeant there and I said, I hate it. And he said, you know what? We'll get you out of it if you really want out. I said, I do. He said, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be a medic. He said, okay. So I wait 2 months pulling KP details and crap details where you're sweeping street. And I get my orders and it says 77010. And in the Air Force, they have specialty codes as opposed to MOS's military occupation specialty. In the Army, then the Air Force has an AFSC, Armed Forces Specialty Code. And I get this and it says 77. And they said, oh, and I had orders for Denver, Colorado. And I had visions of John Wayne. So, in a saloon in Miss Kitty, you know, this was before Miss Kitty. Anyway, so I get the order and it's security police or air police in those days. And I thought, well, I'm an ex little hoodlum. Why would they do that to me? And it was such a blessing because not only that, but the Air Force is known for being a little bit softer, a little bit easier, except in the police end of it. In the police end of it, you better have spit shine shoes. You better be spit and polish. And I loved it. All those guys were like father figures. Growing up without a dad, the master sergeants and stuff that I had, the guys that influenced my life was unbelievable, you know, and I can name every single one of them. And it started in basic training, you know, from Horace Toomey and Pro Throw and Sergeant Willis and Sergeant Lemon, who made me eat a banana peel one day. I took a banana out of the mess hall, and you're not supposed to take food out of the mess hall. And it was a Sunday afternoon, there was nobody around, and I asked the security guard at the gate, can I go get my mail? He said, sure, so they let me out. I'm walking down the sidewalk and I look around and I eat that banana and I hear, come here, boy. I said, oh no. I look up in the window and there's Sergeant Lemon. He comes down, he said, where did you get that? I said, I took it from the mess hall, sir. He said, you what? I said, I took it from the mess hall, sir. And he said, was it good? I said, yes, sir, it was excellent. He said, but you haven't finished it. And he said, what did you do with the peel? I said, I put it in my pocket, sir. He says, then you haven't finished it, have you? I said, no, sir. He made me eat the peel, and the very end of the banana, that black thing, what's really, really hard and crunchy, I ate that too. To this day, when I eat a banana, I remember Sergeant Lemon. But I love the guy. I love the guy. Anyway, I wound up in air traffic control, wound up getting out of that school, wound up in security police or air police. I get sent to Denver. I get here on August 4th, 1962. And I couldn't believe it. I looked around and everything was so clean. I went downtown on a bus and I said, where's the papers blown in the street? Where's the garbage cans and rats? And, you know, growing up in New York, you know, I was amazed. Did my tour here and met my wife. And here's one of those things where they say that when God closes one door, he opens another. I was working the gate. It was the main gate. It was 1960, still 62 or just early 63. 63, probably January of 63. And I was on patrol in a car that night, but my Sergeant O'Neill called me and said, Deasy, you need to go up and take over the main gate from Hamilton. He got sick. He's going on sick call. And I said, but Sarge, I'm on patrol tonight. He said, not anymore. He said, get your butt up to the main gate and take it over. I said, yes, sir. So I went up there and relieved John Hamilton. 15 minutes later, these two good-looking high school girls come driving in. And the one girl driving, I'll never forget, her name was Linda Rivera. Never seen her since that day. And there was a gal sitting on the other side, but I never saw her. And I said, where are you guys going? They said, we're going to the PX. And I said, you're on an Air Force base. It's BX base, not post. I said, it's 9 o'clock at night. And I figured, go ahead. I just waved them on. They weren't a threat. 15 minutes later, here they come with the Strategic Air Command security police escorting them out because they wound up, that's when Denver had nuclear weapons just outside at Titan missiles. And the SAC security police are bringing them back up to the main gate, one in front and one in back. And the sergeant says, did you let them on? I said, yes, sir, I did. He says, well, they were at the reentry vehicle area, walked up to the fence where you have armed guards. There's nuclear weapons in there. And he said, I got two girls coming at me, you know. He, at gunpoint, says, get down. And so they're escorting him off the base. So I talked to this, I said, well, why did you? They said, well, we didn't know where to go. It's okay. And I looked across the way and I saw my wife. And I walked over to that side and I got her phone number. And I figured we'd never see each other again. Then that night, I went to the barracks, talked to my best man, Dave Sani, and I said, I met the girl tonight that I'm going to marry. He says, you're kidding me. I said, no. I said, instant. I said, I looked at her and I know. Well, almost a year later, we were married.
Oh my God.
She was 3 months pregnant, but we did that on purpose. She's only 16. It wasn't going to last. And she came from a pretty affluent family. Her father was the chief of pediatrics at Children's Hospital. Country club set, they belonged to Cherry Hills and all. He was going to kill me. And I thank God I never had any daughters, but he was going to kill me. And, but we knew better. We forced the issue to get pregnant, so they couldn't say no. And we did. And he offered us an abortion. And we said, are you crazy? We planned this. We want the, and that child right now graduated with honors from Pomona High School, the male scholastic athlete of the year, went to law school at CU, went to undergrad at CU, worked in the DA's office in Jefferson County, and he and his wife are now both lawyers. They own their own law firm in southeast Denver, and he's multimillionaire, you know, has really done well. So without that, so then that was the early days. So from there, I get sent to Korea, and we get the orders right after we got married, and I leave Gretchen, and she stays with her folks, and she gives birth to Dan, and I got the notice. I was at the Airmen's Club at Kunsan Air Base in Korea, and they said, you have a phone call from the Red Cross. And I said, yes, I know what this is. And I built this triangle, and in the triangle was 30 days with a pyramid. And it was Barbara Ann or Daniel Nelson, because in those days you didn't know what baby you didn't know what gender you were going to have, right? And so I crossed out the Barbara Ann, and it was Daniel Nelson was her maiden name, and Daniel was after my brother. And so of course I still have that. I have that as a keepsake, you know. And it was and then of course I got the telegram, the official. At Kunsan, there wasn't much communication, but just talking to that on the phone. And I said, oh my God, I'm a father. And then we got home and got stationed in New Mexico. Tim was born down there. I was the first air policeman to ever make Airman of the Quarter down there on that base ever. And I think because of the experience of where I had come from, dealings in life, how to treat people, how to, the upbringing I had was really, really tough, but I've got such a soft spot in my heart for children especially, I don't care, black, white, brown, handicapped, straight, blind, it doesn't matter. They're kids. I got this thing for kids. I absolutely love them. And you know what? They love me.
Yeah,
I'm not just, you know, even all the neighbor kids, little 2-year-old across the street, when he comes down the street in Grandpa's truck, he said, that's Brian's house, because he knows his name is Elliot. And I always go, Elliot, like E.T., you know, and he loves it. Yeah, I love kids. So we had 2 kids. Then we got stationed down in Mississippi, and I did a good job in Vietnam. And my year there was not earth shattering, but uh, things that affected me later that I never knew. I had one. Uh, it's January 66, 67, and my neighbor across the street, we were living on base. I had already reenlisted, and I was working in investigations in because of my criminal childhood. I, I knew how to identify crooks and get confessions out of them. I was really good at it, and I learned from a guy named John D. Bell, who had been a World War II counterintelligence officer, and he taught me how to interview people and stuff and interrogate people and how to get them to open up. And born and raised in New York, I know I'm a gabber and I'm an extrovert. I know that. I talk to anybody and everybody. And he, I stayed in investigations, and it was a plum job. We had 100 and something security policemen. You only had two of us in investigations. So what you would do is take cases of burglary or sexual assault. I mean, the stuff that OSI wouldn't take, that's the Office of Special Investigations, they wouldn't take, we would take. And I don't think I ever failed to get a confession out of burglars and stuff like that. Say, look, we're not going to talk about this case. I've got you nailed down on this case. You burglarized this place. I want to talk about all the other ones. And I said, we'll give you those free gratis. You don't have to do anything. And the first thing you learn about interviewing is you got to make friends with the suspect. And the first thing you do as a man is you put your hand out to him. And the natural response from a man is to shake your hand. Whether he likes you or not, or trusts you or not, he will shake your hand. And that's when you do that bond thing. And John Bell taught me this. He said, look, you're a man, I'm a man. So you're on equal ground, right? Say, you've done some bad things, I've done some bad things. But we're going to be honest. We're not going to lie to each other, man to man. Agreed? And they look you in the eye and they say, okay. And it's so easy to talk to people then and say, we're not going to talk about this, we're going to talk about that. And then and as it goes, they just naturally go into all the other things they did, which you've already told them you're not going to prosecute them for. But you can clear those cases up of auto thefts or theft from motor vehicle, burglaries in barracks. I had one kid, in fact, when I came back from Vietnam, that's how I got into investigations. My captain from Vietnam knew the captain of Mississippi, and he sent him a letter and said, this Sergeant Deasy is a good troop, take care of him. And I did. And first case I got 10 years and went to Leavenworth. So yeah, anyway, but the Vietnam experience when I got there, I was in E4 in the security police, and all our job was to protect the perimeter at night. We had 24 what they call Da Nang bunkers that are huge. They're probably 15 feet wide, but they're built like not a pyramid, kind of like a hexagon. And then you have a concrete portion on top, and then you have four like wooden posts, and you have sandbags on top of that. Inside that little square that you have that's about 3 feet by 3 feet, you have an M60 machine gun, you have a can with M26 hand grenades, and a can with slap flares. So in case you would get penetrated, you can light it up. But between each of those bunkers, which are about 250 yards apart, you have a canine handler, and then you have a security alert team, which is in a vehicle, and there's 6 of those for the base. And what you would do is if the dog would get a sight, scent, or movement alert, then you deploy those 3 troops in addition to your bunker. And sometimes we had little horses. I was at Pleiku, way up in the Central Highlands, 35 miles from Cambodia, and 35 kilometers, not miles. It would be about 28 miles. The Army used to shoot over us with 155s and shell into Cambodia when the president was saying we weren't even in Cambodia. Yeah, we were. And liar, liar, pants on fire, right? So, and they'd shoot right over us, and we'd always pray, please don't have a short round, because you'd hear the boom, then you'd hear the going over your head. I don't know if people know this, but at night, if you're being shot at, and you can actually hear a bullet. And I asked this Sergeant Weeks one night, great big black dude, great leader. I said, Sarge, what? And I was still in E4 then. I said, what is that? We're in the bomb dump, hiding among some bomb fins. There's no actual armed bombs there. And I said, what is that? I said, I keep thinking I have a moth in my helmet. And it was that, like, And I said, what is that? He said, those are bullets going over here. I said, I never even heard the crack. He said, that's because they're probably a mile and a half away.
Oh my
They're
gosh.
shooting 6mm bullets at us, you know. And it was Charlie out there in the boonies, you know. And but the things you learned there. So everything was fine. I got there in May, June, July came, and I was picked to go into Central Security Control as opposed to working the perimeter. And you're what they call a communicator plotter. You know where every aircraft is on the field. You know where every walking post is, every K9, every security alert team, every fixed post. Then you have 3 lines of security. You have the perimeter with the dogs in the bunkers. Then you have inner security with the security alert teams. Then you have the hump guards, they call them, all right, on the runway or taxiways that have little revetments, that have A1E Sky Raiders, and you have a security policeman in there with a 12 gauge. That was in case Charlie came and got through those 2 outer rings and got in, then they would take him out with a 12 gauge because you can't lose your aircraft. And they have their own little defensive positions between like a runway and a taxiway that have sandbags about 3 high and enough for one guy to lay down behind them and an ammo can outside because GIs are famous for throwing trash and not having a can to put it in. And one night we got hit, and I had a kid, carpenter, who was one of these tough guys, and he was telling me, "Yeah, well, if I get one of these Charlies, I'll cut their throat and throw them over the fence." And I was with this kid named Harris, and he'd say, "Carpenter," he said, "you know what you need to do, man? You need to shut your trap, man." If this kid had just gotten there, he didn't know what he was talking about, you know. I'm all gung ho, and his old man was an E8 in the Army, so he was an ass kicker. You know, he was going to be an ass kicker. And I said, yeah, well, I said, when that day comes, buddy, I said, you better light their ass up before they get over the fence. Because if they're getting over the fence, we're in deep doo-doo, you know?
Oh,
So
dear.
we get sort of hit by rockets, and they're coming in right behind us. And they're called BFRs, big effing rockets, right? And they're 122mm around, and they're 6 feet long. But they fire them from 6 miles away. It's not something you could crank up and pop, 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 and, you know, defend yourself. You're just gonna you got to get lucky and hope you don't get your ass killed, you know. Well, what happens to my tough guy carpenter? The rounds are coming in behind us like 100 yards, and he hyperventilates, Mr. Tough Guy, you know, good, all that stuff. So we get all done. I had to take him to the dispensary, and Harris is saying, "Oh, what a tough guy," you know. Anyway, we had a few experiences like that, but he never did work with me again. And then I made staff sergeant, and I wound up inside. But before that happened, too, our armory got hit. We had an old French building right on the flight line, right next to CTOC, which is the 2 Corps Tactical Operations Center for the area we were in Vietnam. And our sandbags were probably 6 deep and 30 high. So even if they hit us, they weren't going to, even our roof was covered. But the building next door had no protection. And it was an old French colonial building, and that was our armory. So you had 24 bunkers. Only every other bunker, I think it was even rod, I can't remember which, was not manned in the daytime when the sun was up. So it cut your day forces like in half compared to what Sea Flight was. We were the midnight security. And so like 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, all the way through 24, the odds would be unoccupied. Well, that M60 and that ammo and all that stuff has to come in every day. You got to load it on a service patrol, a 1.5-ton vehicle pulls up, it's okay, and you're loaded up. You have a little loading dock right by the bunker. You throw it on, and then that guy has to check that in. Well, we think what happened was I'm in CSC, and it's probably 6:10. We're getting off at 7 or somewhere there close till the relief comes in and takes over. And I hear boom. And I said, damn, that was cool. What was that? Because it's too late for Charlie. It's already getting light out. They never hit you when it's light out. And I said, what the hell was that? Then another boom. And I said, oh my God, we're getting hit in the daytime. And then the third one floored us. I mean, we hit the deck. It blew the whole building, blew the roof. This was a building like 60 feet long, maybe 30, 40 feet wide. It blew the whole building, the walls, the ceiling blew off the whole building. And they had these old tiles on the building, blew the roof right off it. And one guy got killed, and we had several injured. One kid walked into CSC, his name was Cineground. He was from Wyoming, I remember that. And he says, Sarge, he says, look at my hand. And I said, where are your fingers? He said, I think they're over there. And was missing 3 fingers, but he was just looking at his hand. He said it didn't hurt or anything. He was kind of in shock, you know. And then I found out that Bobby Pasco had been killed. And here's the bad part. Bobby Pasco was a kid from Ohio, was married, had a daughter, was stationed at Loring Air Force Base, Maine. And he told me a story once about getting up in a wheel well in the snow on a B-52, and there was a bobcat up there with him. And he was on one side, the bobcat was on the other, and they were both trying to stay warm. And he said he never forgot it, but he was a big, big strapping guy. So the night before, I'm making out the duty roster. We have like 75 guys for posts. I didn't do the canine posting. They had a canine sergeant do that, but I do the SAT teams, the bunkers, and close in support. I'm making it out, and Schreiber, this staff sergeant that I work with, said, who are you going to put on the weapons intake tomorrow? I said, oh, I'll do it. I'll get it, because I haven't been there for a while. I was still in E4, you know. So I said, I'll do it. He goes, no, let's not do it tomorrow. He said, I want to go to Chow and then go over to somewhere and get something to eat, and then go over to the PX. I heard they're getting in potato chips or something ridiculous, you know. They always send us stuff. Like they'd send us laundry soap. I didn't need laundry soap. What the hell are you doing? Anyway, yeah, they send us all this crap you'd never use. Anyway, so I said, no, I'll take it. He said, no, put somebody else on it. So I looked down the name and I picked Pasco, right? I put Pasco in, right? I saw the look. Yeah. So I felt bad, but I to this day, when I went to Arlington and I saw his grave, and I know that should have been me. I was supposed to be in there. Schreiber talked me out of it. But like this doctor told me, she said, you know what? God's plan was for you to go on and for him to go with God. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. And I'm a Christian. You know, I believe in God. I wear my patron saint, St. Michael. My wife gave me that. When I went in the SWAT unit in Denver, she gave me a St. Michael's medal. She said, please don't get killed. Because I had already been involved in 2 fatal shootings myself on the police department. Oh, gosh. And anyway, so Bobby Pasco. So, yeah.
It's one of those random things. It's not at all like it should have been you or
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, we lost another guy. You know, you tell people, listen, you get hit, get down, get low. Well, rockets, that's true. But mortars, if mortar hits on concrete, no, it doesn't do that. It goes straight out. If you take a wine bottle, fill it with water, and you drop it off a tower, when it hits concrete, you watch and you slow motion, you'll see the glass and everything goes out this way, laterally, like that far off the ground, right? If it penetrates, then it does this, because it's the only way out of the cone. So when rockets penetrate, they always land, there's a delay, then they go off. They blow this way. Mortars, if it's hitting on hard concrete, go this way. He had a flat on the flight line, changing a flat tire, got underneath the Jeep. Incoming mortars coming in. One hit like 50 feet from him. I mean, we're talking way over there. Piece of shrapnel came right across, boom, gone. Oh. Found him dead under the Jeep.
Oh my gosh, it just happens.
Don't buy any lotto tickets if you're that dude, you know, because you ain't lucky, you know. Well, okay, I'm good. Okay, yeah.
So you've given us many examples of your vivid memories. Is there any one particular memory that stands out more than others? Good or bad?
Yeah, coming home. That's all right. I landed in Denver. It was 1960. It was May 4th, I think. Yeah, it was May 4th. Because my son just sent me a thing the other day. He said, what were you doing 55 years ago today? Because he remembers when I came home. He was 4 and Tim was 2. My oldest one, Dan, was 4 though, and that's the one I said, you're the man of the house now.
Yes.
And in those days, you got off of 727 in Denver and you walked on the actual tarmac there, and then you got in stairs and walked up to the terminal, and my wife was standing in the window. I could see her, and she was 5'9" and all the options that a man would love. You know, she's just the light of my life. She still is. I have a girlfriend and I love her, but I'm still in love with my wife, you know. Anyway, she was standing there with Tim and Dan, she was holding her hand. So Dan says, I remember you walking and waving. And then he came up and he took my dog tags off and wore them. And then Tim, I went like this to him and he went, like, I want nothing to do with you. Who are you? You know, it took me a while. And yeah, that memory of coming home that day, that and landing in Seattle at SeaTac and going downtown Seattle, we got in about midnight and we hit this bar at the Olympic Hotel. And we walked in the bar and a lady was singing and she stopped singing. And it was contrary to all that crap you hear about nobody liked Vietnam vets and they'd spit. We didn't have that. I didn't have that experience. I had a guy at the airport give me the look one day. I said, you got a problem? He says, no, sir. And he got away from me because I was going to knock him out. But down there, the lady stopped singing on the stage. And it was like a little nightclub, probably 100 people in there, you know. And she said, hey, guys, are you just back from the Nam? And we said, yes, we are. She said, you can't buy a drink in this bar. And we got completely shit-faced. I mean, we got, plus we had 3 bottles of our own that we took up to the room. We stayed up all night because we were afraid to go to sleep because we were afraid we were going to miss our planes, you know. And then the 2 other guys met women in the bar and they said, come on the bar. And I said, oh no, this ain't happening, you know. Anyway, I left them. They were both still in the hotel with the 2 girls they had met in the bar. One was a Lieutenant Liba and the other kid was McClung. He's from somewhere by Joplin, Missouri, and his family owns a oh God, I can't remember his name. Anyway, I never looked up either one of them, but I never saw those guys again either. But getting on that plane, I remember I was still probably sky drunk, you know, and those Stu came up, they were stewardesses then instead of flight attendants. She walked up and she said, would you like some Dramamine or coffee or would you like both? I said, how about both? And I, you know, started swelling down the coffee. I'd been up all night and it didn't matter. I was going to see my wife and kids. It didn't, you know. So yeah, and driving across the United States with the kids. We bought we had saved money. Gretchen even saved money while I was gone. She saved $700. And I was being that New York upbringing, I was an entrepreneur kind of in Vietnam. I had the only refrigerator within a 6 barrack distance. And I had bought it off a guy for $100. And it's one of those little bar refrigerators. So I started selling cold beer for 25 cents a can. And it cost me 10 cents a can to buy it warm. And I had 2 E3s that worked for me. And every case they brought me, I gave them an extra $1. Because a case of beer was $2.40. I'd give them $3.40. So if they could make $5 a day, $5 a day then was pretty good money. Well, then at the end of the month, everybody would sign a little tab because I was always up out of my rack filling it up with beer. Or I had Mama Son. She'd go over and fill up the beer for me because I paid her $6 a month to wash my clothes, you know. And anyway, and guys would sign the pad. Well, at the end of the month, I'd walk up and say, okay, Tommy Mousy, $13.25. Green, $17.50. Sergeant so-and-so, yeah, you owe me $24. Yeah, he said, I drank a lot of beer. I said, yeah, you did. And all these guys would pay me. Well, I bought my wife a set of pearls. I bought her an Omega diamond watch, and I came home with $700. You know,
Nice.
that was because I was only making 77. I was in E5 with over 6 years when I came back, and I was making $348 a month, $348 a month. I figured, how the hell did you make it on that? Yeah. But we bought a new Dodge Charger with the money we saved. Plus, she got an educational fund her dad gave her. It was like 10 grand or something. So we were living on it. The new Dodge Charger was $4,000. We had to trade in our 65 Ford Falcon, 3-speed on the column, you know, no air. No. So we drove to New York with the kids in the back. We took a crib mattress, put it in the back, and then put 2 boxes where the void is, where your legs would be in the back seat so that it wouldn't collapse. And they played Mr. Potato in the back of that car all the way from here to New York, all the way from Denver to New York. It was great. And then we went all the way down the coast. Now you got to hear this one little story. So we're going down the coast, and my wife had never been in the South, and I had been stationed in Mississippi. So we're going down the coast, and we cross the South Carolina border. And she goes, oh my God. We look out in this field, and there's a guy on a white horse, and he's wearing a Ku Klux Klan thing on his head, and he's got like a sword out or whatever it was, and it said, "Welcome to South Carolina. Join your local clan." And I hadn't even seen that, even being stationed in Mississippi. I thought, oh my God. She goes, "You've got to be kidding me." And this is 1968. I thought, wow. So wait, it gets better. So we're going down the road, and my boy's in the back. Gretchen took a little Pepsi bottle, and they used to have these little stoppers that were rubber, and you pushed like that. Do you remember them? No. Okay. Anyway, you remember.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
kiddo, I'm not dating you. So she'd take that and she'd stand them up between the two seats, and there were no seat belts in the car. We didn't drive anyway, and she'd let them pee in the little bottle. So we're going, yeah, and without, otherwise you got to stop every 20 miles. Daddy, I got to pee. Okay, so we're going down the road, and so Gretchen is sitting there. She's just looking out the window. She says, "Sweetie, can you stop pretty soon? I got to go potty." I said, "Okay." So I'm driving. So jokingly, I said, "Why don't you just use the bottle like Dan and Tim do?" So Dan pops up between the seats. Now he's 4, right? And he's holding on the seats. He says, "Daddy, Mama can't use the bottle." I said, "Why is that, buddy?" He goes, "Mommy's wee-wee is spread out like a flower." But it was one of those, I think about it today, and I think the innocence of a child with his mom, because she used to take baths with him. Come on, they're 2 and 3 and 4 years old, and they didn't know. But Dan said, "I'll never forget that." He said, "You guys have told that story." So I said, "Dan, it's a shot like, and you were so sincere." And his mom went like this, "Oh my God." So I think that's when Mama stopped taking baths with the boys.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, that's definitely a humorous event. Do you have any other humorous events to remember?
Well, probably quite a few, but when the boys, when we were stationed in Mississippi, then Camille hit, and hurricane, August 18th, 69, and my wife and children we had just left, we had just vacated a beach apartment, the Beauvoir Beach Apartments, which is between Biloxi and Gulfport, and like 50 yards from the beach. And we had left there because the rent was too much. We moved to a house in Ocean Springs, and the guy across the street had worked in investigations. Then got transferred into investigations, and he said, "Hey, you know what? There's a house right across the street from me, Lemon Realty, $80." I said, "You're kidding," because we were paying like 95. Well, $15 a month was, quite a bit of money then, right?
Yeah.
So we moved there, and a couple of months later, that's when Camille hit, and all my friends had lost it. Our place, we owned our own refrigerator. That's the first thing we ever bought. We bought a green avocado green. Anyway, we'd have lost everything we had. And the guy who ran the Star service station, right as we went on to the highway there on the beach, he watched his whole family float out of his business that night. Never saw him again.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
killed 248 people. And I wound up going in during the middle of the hurricane. We all got called in to be on duty, the police end of it. And they had a woman that got her phone working or something, and she was in a wheelchair in a house, and she was up to her neck in water, and she took her children and put them up on top of a medicine cabinet, and we had to actually stop the trucks we were driving. It was right after the eye hit. The winds were going again, but the water depth was unbelievable, and we walked through waist-water deep and got in that house, found her, got her out, got her in the tree. She's in a wheelchair, going around the house like this in a wheelchair, but we got her out. And 6 months later, I get out of the service and all that stuff. I'm in the Denver Police Academy, and they said I have to go to Lowry Air Force Base to get an Airman's Medal Award. I said, "What?" And they said, "Yeah, you evidently went and got some woman in a house out of a hurricane." I said, "Yeah, but that's her job. That wasn't, So,
oh my God.
but same thing happened when I got back from Vietnam, though. When I got back from Vietnam, I'm a staff. I'm working patrol, and I'm working day because we went 3 swings, 3 mids, 3 days, 3 off. And I'm working days, and Staff Sergeant Greg, who was senior to me, my flight commander, says, "Hey, Sergeant Deas," he said, "they want to see you at headquarters." I said, "For what?" He said, "I have no idea." And I thought, "Oh, maybe somebody messed up retreat or something," because we had to take the flag down every night. And there was a very strict protocol. You don't drop the flag. You don't, you just, you want to go to jail, screw that up, and so I go up there, and they said, "Yeah, you need to see General," I can't remember his name, 2-star general. I said, Oh Lord, what did I do now? I figured, what I do, write his wife a ticket or something for speeding her? You know, I don't know what the hell I did, you know. So they said, no, it's an award ceremony. I said, really? So I walk in, and here's all this brass. There's my squadron commander, my group commander, some full bird colonel, a 1-star general, a 2-star general. And he just smiles at me. He said, come on in, Sergeant. I said, yes, sir. And I go and report. And I said, reporting is ordered. He said, yeah, he's been awarded the Bronze Star for Vietnam. And the minute I got that, I thought of Donnie Bobby Pascal. And I thought, God damn it, he should be getting this.
Oh,
And I
no, no.
just
You deserved it.
of course, I have it mounted. My wife is really proud. I've got it mounted. It's at home. But come on, you you do what you got to do. You don't expect change. You know, pay your dues. You don't expect any change, and that was a shock to me. You know that, and then, and to get the Airman's Medal, it's a non-combat heroism thing where you get me and 2 other guys got it. That these other 2 guys are with me, and one was a complete moron. He said, "What about these wires?" I said, "Do you really think there's any electricity in the wires? Stupid. You know they've been laying here all night in the floodwaters, and you couldn't hardly see the buildings, all the trees that were down. You know, it's crazy." But you feel a little guilty because there were guys over there. I had a kid that worked for me, should have got us for a Silver Star for gallantry in action. What he did one night with incoming rounds, driving a 1.5-ton truck through rounds coming in, trying to get to a perimeter to get ammo to these guys in slap flares and hand grenades. There's another story. I'm service patrol one night. I'm bringing coffee around to the bunkers, and I get down in this little ravine. It was bunker 3. I get down there. The kid is up in the bunker. His name was Woods, and he says, "Hey Sarge, how you doing?" I said, "Good. I got coffee." He's good. So he comes down. He gets his little cup out. You know, he's putting coffee in. All of a sudden, we hear dunk, 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 dunk. That's the sound of a mortar tube.
Uh-oh.
And when they go that fast, exactly, it was oh shit. And you go, uh-oh. And when you hear them that quick, I jumped up on the running board because I thought they were hitting Camp Holloway. That was 52nd Aviation over there, the helicopter unit, about a half a mile from us over here. And I thought, oh, they're hitting that. So I jump up. The first round hits them back to me about 60 yards and blows this building door, the police sliding door off. And I said, oh, shit. So we jump under the 1.5 ton. Well, what do I have in the back of the 1.5 ton? Ammo, slap flares, hand grenades, and coffee. So luckily it didn't hit us when we get out of there. But that sound to this day, and this started about 10 years ago. When I hear that, if I'd say right now, if I go dunk, I get I call it a scared feeling. My doctor explained it to me when I said I'm having a little bit of discomfort, and she said, "What's it like?" And I said, "You know when you almost get in a car accident and you get that scared feeling in your chest, like, oh my God, I almost got killed." I said, it's a fear. She said, of impending doom. I said, that nothing described it better than that.
Yeah.
Her name was Sue Williams, this doctor. I'm proving it to you that I'm not old enough to remember names. And she told me, she said, Brian, that's impending doom feeling. She said, there's something going on in your body. And I said, no. I said, no, there isn't. She said, listen to me. And she was my wife's doctor. And I went into Kaiser there at 4 p.m. on a Friday. She put me in the hospital. I was getting ready to walk out. I said, they couldn't find any enzymes. I hadn't had a heart attack and all that. That was Friday night. Tuesday morning, I had quadruple bypass.
Oh my gosh.
And a visiting nurse, God bless him, came into the ER, and I was getting dressed. He said, where are you going? I said, there's nothing wrong with me, man. I said, this is bullshit. I'm getting out of here. He goes, listen to me, man to man. He said, nurse aside. He said, if you walk out of this hospital, you're a fool. He said, buddy, when that happens, he said, that's your brain saying, we're giving you a little extra early warning. He said, that's an early warning system. Something's not right. And I said, hey, I don't smoke. I don't overdrink. You know, I'm in great shape. You know, I said, I just retired. I've been in the SWAT unit twice. I can still run. I can still lift. He goes, don't leave the hospital. I said, all right.
Good.
Next morning, I took the treadmill, and this Asian doctor almost killed me. She kept telling me, you know, keep going, keep going, keep going. And finally, I said, did you hear me? And I got really pissed off. And she said, no, you have to keep going. I did. Can I say this?
Yeah.
I said, fuck you. I'm done. I'm sitting down. And she looked at me and said, Oh, she got all excited then. And I sat down in the chair and she was trying to get my heart rate to 140. If I run, my resting heart rate in the morning is 50.
Oh,
When I'm walking around, it's 60, 61. And I recover quickly, but 140, you're trying to kill me. And I was about to collapse. And I said, no, not you. And I sat down. She put pills in my mouth and said, oh, Jesus. She didn't know what the hell she was doing,
oh my
you
God.
know?
Oh my
And I was
gosh.
really pissed off. Then I get upstairs and this doc came and saw me and said, I got the results. He said, we're going to do bypass surgery. He said, what do you think about that? And I said, you going to give me a zipper? He said, yeah. And I said, how many? He says, 4. I said, 4? He said, well, you got other blockages that if we're going to be there, if you're going to do the rings, let's do the valves too. You know, the old story. He said, do you have any questions for me? And his name is Mark Hammond. And he's known from some guys here that work at the VA
Mhm.
as the best cardiac or what do you call the cardiac guy?
Cardiac.
Yeah, the best heart doctor you could get, you know.
Cardiologist.
And they both worked for him. These guys are anesthesiologists. When I had my nose done here in March, and they said, "Oh, we know Mark Hammond. He's the best." You know, I said, "Yeah, he did me." And he said, "Do you have any questions for me?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "What's that?" I said, "Where'd you go to med school?" And he went like that. He said, "Harvard." I said, "Where'd you go to pre-med?" He said, "Harvard." And I said, "Ivy League." I said, because my father-in-law, being a Dartmouth grad, being a doctor and the head of pediatrics at Denver at Children's, always told me when you're getting ready to get cut, buddy, you find out where that guy went to school, where he did his undergrad, and where did he graduate in his class. You don't want a guy from Alabama State cutting you open that graduated 39th out of 40. And it was so true because Mark Hammond, he told me, he said, no one's ever asked me that question. And I had and I went in there, no fear at all. I said, dude, and I'm not a particularly religious person, okay? I believe in God. There has to be a God because I got to see Gretchen again. And all these cops came to me because I had just retired. I retired 3, 4 months before. I'm still 59 years old in fighting shape. You know, I could still go. And they're wheeling me in, and 5 or 6 cops are say, "You're going to be fine, Brian," and all. And I'm going toward the door, and they say, "We're going to give you something to relax you." And I know what that means. We're going to shoot you up, dope you up, right?
Yeah.
And I've never been a needle. I don't like me. I dealt with too many junkies, you know. And I'm going down the hall, and I remember the doors opening. They're pushing me on this gurney thing. There was a gal staying here holding something, and I could hear Bette Midler singing, "God is watching you." I swear to God, that's a gospel truth. And I'm not a Bible thumper. And it was that song that she sings that God is watching you. Never forgot it.
Oh
Never.
my gosh.
And when I came out, I was in the intensive care ward, and I was in a room about this size. It was huge, and there were these glass doors. There's a good-looking little Asian nurse sitting right there, an RN like you know. She was sitting right there, and she said, "How you doing?" I said, "Oh." I said, "I'm a little dry," and so she gave me a cloth or something to just bite on. She said, "Are you hungry?" I said, "I am starving." She said, "Okay." She said, "I'll be right back." She said, "What would you like?" I said, "Yep." And I don't know where this came from. I said, "Any cream of wheat or oatmeal?" That's what I wanted, you know. And I said, "Oh, great," you know. She said, "I'll get you some cream of wheat." So she walks out those doors and it closes, boom. So I look over there and there's a table and a chair. So I just take the IV, take the belt off, get out of the bed. And yeah.
Oh
Yeah, I know. I stroll over there and I pull the IV thing with me because it's on wheels. I've seen them do that in the movies, you know. And I sit down at the table. She comes over, hits the door opens, she walks in and goes, "No, what are you doing?" She said, "I'll get fired." What are you doing? I said, "Well, the table's right there. I'm not eating in bed." So she let me actually stay there and eat and then get back in the bed. You know, but I thought that was, and
Pretty
5 days
funny.
later, I was out on my way home.
Well, good for you. I'm
Can
good.
I ask about his police career for a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to go back to, I counted 4 medals. Did you have any more medals that you hadn't mentioned?
No, they didn't have the combat preparedness course. I mean, the combat infantry badge because we weren't infantry, but we're still in. A lot of people think, well, Air Force, you guys had it made. You had 3 square meals a day and all that stuff. And I used to tell people as a joke, the only military people in the Air Force are the security policemen. because we're the ones on the perimeter with we're the only one weapon. When the Tet Offensive hit in January of '68, they gave me all the augmentees because I had made staff sergeant. So they gave me all the augmentees, which was about 80, and they'd have to stand guard mount, and you give them a rifle. They had one magazine of ammo. They had no flak jackets and no helmets.
Oh my goodness.
And when the Tet Offensive hit, we went shoulder to shoulder on our perimeter of the air base, and they never did get in. They tried a couple of times. They never did get in. We'd light their ass up,
Oh, God.
But we used to get hit
Yes.
with rockets a lot from 6 or 7 miles away. We had 2 outposts up on Artillery Hill, and it was Foxtrot and Foxtrot Alpha. And what you do is you separate them by about a mile. And then when you had flashes at night, the one guy would get an azimuth reading on the compass, the other guy would get an azimuth reading. And then in 2 Corps headquarters, where they ran the artillery out of, they would draw a line, put a pin, take the 2 pieces of thread, cross them, and wherever they cross, that's where the rounds are coming from. It's simple deduction. You just look
Yeah.
at the map, and then they would put the outgoing fire. But Charlie was pretty smart. They build L trenches so that if you were shooting at them east to west, like if you were going east to west, they build their trenches east to west, like this. So if you were going to land around, you'd have to put it into a 3-foot opening.
Oh my
Who does that?
Yeah.
You can't do that. That's where they were pretty. I'll tell you what, they had nothing, but they were smart, and they could live on a handful of rice for days.
So tell us more about your occupation after service.
The Denver Police Department. I was so lucky. We got out a couple of days before Thanksgiving. I got an 89-day early out. That's a story in itself because they told me, "Oh, you won't get out." I was an E5 and with an Airman's Medal and a Bronze Star. They go by points with 2 overseas tours, both isolated, one in Korea, one in Vietnam. And they said, "You got so many points." This E9 told me, he said, "You'll be an E6 as soon as you get there. You'll get another stripe." And I thought, boy, that'd be nice for the money, and let's face it, the more stripes you have, your quality of life, and your family and everything. And I thought, And then he said, you wind up doing another tour in Nam. He said, "You'll be a young master sergeant." He said, "You'll have 15 years and be a master sergeant." And what it came down to was, let me cross train, let me go push boots through boot camp, or let me cross train into being a medic, my first love, or let me transfer to Lowry Air Force Base. They wouldn't give me any of them. And then they told me that I was second to go back to Vietnam because all the other E5s that were there by humanitarian reassignments because they had either kids with polio or a wife that was psychotic or something, and they needed special medical attention, And I said, "No." I said, "I can't be." He said, "Yeah, in the spring, you'll be getting orders. You'll be going back to Nam." And I said, "No, I'm not." I said, "No. I've already done 2 isolated tours. I'm not leaving my kids." And that's, we talked about that, how much I miss my kids. I cried at night. And I said, "No." I said, "I'll get out before I'll do that." And he looked at me and said, "You won't get out." Well, don't throw that down in front of me, pal. 89 days later, I was out. I got out, and they couldn't believe it. I felt so lonely. I almost felt betrayed a little bit. Like, I just gave you 8 years, and you won't let me go change or do this and still be part of the service. I tried to transfer over to the Army, except they want to make me a warrant officer, except they wanted to put me in artillery. And I said, "I'm not going in artillery." That's another trip to Nam, And it wasn't the thing in Nam. I didn't care about I can do the duty. I was smart enough to survive, but I don't want to leave my kids again. We tried to get to Europe. We took pictures. They did. One was Norway at the U.S. Embassy thing, and I thought, wow, we didn't get that. We didn't get SHAPE headquarters. I couldn't get Germany. I couldn't get Spain. We weren't in France anymore. Great Britain couldn't get anything. So I said, "The hell with it. I'll get out." And I got it. Best move I ever made. And it was when I got out, it was, are we going to go to Denver or New York, where I grew up? And my grandmother on my mother's side being in the first policewoman class in New York City, and my grandfather on my father's side being a New York City fireman, I knew what I was going to do. I was going to be a cop because I fell in love with it, So Denver or New York. And I told Gretchen, I said, I don't even want to consider New York, babe. I said, you know what? Dope was just becoming pretty prevalent then. And I said, I don't want my kids. No, we're going to Denver. We came to Denver. We moved in with my in-laws, and God bless them both. They gave us $6,000 to put a down payment on a house, and it was $142 a month. And that's when I signed up to go to school because they gave me $144 a month to go to Metro. That paid our house payment. But I got out November 18th, 69. March 16th, I was in the police academy. And there were
Awesome.
quite a few vets in there. We never discussed NOM or any of that. I had Marines, sailor, Swabbies, jarheads, everybody, but we never talked about it. Years later, we did. Juan Maldonado, a good friend of mine, I never knew till we had 20 years on the job that he'd been the 9th Infantry down the Mekong Delta.
Oh
I had no idea. 1971, I had a year and a half on the job, but doing 8 years in military police. We got a silent alarm one night. I was working with a guy named Stan Flint, who just passed away a couple of years ago. Good friend of mine. Burglar alarm at Matsunaga Drug on Colfax and LaPlant. And it's funny because the guy who owned that drugstore, his wife was my father-in-law's secretary when my father-in-law was a doctor. So there's a connection there. Anyway, this guy comes out with a bat. I drop my partner off at the back. I come around to the front, and it's like 2 in the morning. And guy comes out the door, grabs a big burlap bag, throws it over his shoulder, comes out in the street. I draw my gun, say, stop, freeze, freeze, freeze. He starts walking toward me, and he's mumbling, and he's got his head down with his hand in his pocket. Well, I know he just burglarized the place, and I'm afraid if he gets close enough to me, there's going to be a shooting. And it turned out there was a shooting, and he got hit 4 times, and I wound up before the grand jury and had to explain to some housewife why I killed this guy. And she said, well, couldn't you have shot him in the hand or in the leg? And she had no clue. And I said, ma'am, I said, when you're afraid for your life, I said, and you think you're gonna die, I said, you shoot for center body mass. I said, this is not Hopalong Cassidy. You don't shoot guns out of people's hands and stuff. It doesn't work that way. And his name was Dennis Garcia, and his girlfriend was Dolores Baca. She was a junkie. About 3 years later, she sends her son out to a car that my partner and I opened the hood on because there was supposed to be a bomb under it. And this is the old days. You didn't call the bomb squad. And this kid came out and tugged on my pants. And I said, hi, buddy, how you doing? You know, rub his head. And he said, are you Deasy? I said, yeah. He said, why'd you kill my dad? And his dad was Dennis Garcia, you know. Anyway, that I saw her years later too. She was at headquarters one time under a different name, and she was getting ready to go up in the jail elevator. And Dave Metzer says, you know her? I said, yeah, that's Dolores Bach. He said, so not the name she gave us, and she told me, F-U-D-C. You know, she was at Jake Japp's one day getting furniture. She's sitting right next to my wife. And the thing went up and a print sign that said G. Deasy. And she started looking around. I was sitting right there. She never recognized me. Anyway, and then the next one was really terrible. It's 2:00 in the morning. My partner and I were in uniform. We backed out of McDonald's. We had just talked to 2 other unmarked cars in the SCAT unit, Special Crime Attack Team. We're working this area specifically for aggravated robbers. And we back out and we pull around the back, and I look, and there's a guy walking with a woman's nylon mask. I thought at first his face was melting is what it looked like. It's weird, you know. And he had this guy by the arm, and these 2 Hispanic dudes are standing there, and they said, hey man, that dude's robbing that dude. And then it clicked like, whoa, we got an armed robbery going down right in front of us, like 50 feet away. So we get over there, they walk into this little garbage shed area where the back door is. And the guy who owns the bar is named George Eufema. It turns out later I'm the only guy that ever arrested him, years before that. And that's his only arrest record. But this kid had a gun in his ear like this, stuck right in his ear, had his left hand in his pocket, taking cash out. And I was probably 5 feet from him, and I got down and squatted down. We had just come out with bulletproof vests then. I had bought my own. It was $29.95. And I was wearing it, yet I still went down because of habit and training to what they call the FBI crouch, where you go down. So I yell freeze, and the guy is 5 feet from me. The minute I yell freeze, he swings the gun to his right, and it comes right in my face. His gun is literally 18 inches from my face, and I do this, boom, I fire 1 round. Well, since he was aiming this way, it hit him in his armpit. His name was Philip Deas, God rest him. He screwed up, but God rest him, you know. The bullet went through completely his chest, his heart, in this arm, out the arm, hit that brick wall, and kept going. He falls down dead. My partner shoots in and kills the door. He shot the door. And the homicide detectives show up, and I'm upset. Of course I'm upset. You just took somebody's life, and I've been through this shit before, you know.
Yeah.
And Jack, Lee Williams, he's dead now. He's a concrete layer. He was actually doing my driveway at my house in East Denver before we moved to Arvada. We got firebombed in East Denver. That's why we moved to Arvada. That's another story. But anyway, he said, you know, I told you I was going to get a hold of you for coffee, but you got a little carried away here, didn't you? And I said, yeah. And then it turns out that the guy who got this Philip Deas was my court clerk's husband, and for traffic court. Everybody's assigned a traffic court in the police department. And her name is Sylvia. And she's a gorgeous kid. We're buddies. Hi, Brian, how you doing? Because I'm such an introvert, you know. I talk to, it's my New York thing. I talk to everybody. I loved her. She's a great, beautiful girl, you know. Real skinny legs, though. She always had these skinny legs. But that was her husband.
Oh my God.
I found it out that next day. I said, you got to be kidding me. And then when I got season tickets, I shared with 4 other people, and both my boys would go to the Nuggets game. Who sits right in front of me? Her and her new husband. I said, you got to be kidding me. But I felt bad for him. And Lee Williams said, yea, but for the grace of God, you should be dead. He said, because he was carrying a Ruger 6, and a Ruger 6 shot, it's cocked. If he contracts, that bullet goes off and hits me right in the face. He said, but it didn't. He just fell to the ground. His finger never contracted. They said, you do 2 things when you have your hand on a gun. When you get killed, you either squeeze it or you just fall. He didn't squeeze it. I'm here. He's gone. You know? And then I had to call my wife and tell her. And she said, okay, I'll see you in the morning. She was, and then I had to go. You go through the DA's interview. You go through all that stuff. And you know, people that think you take somebody's life away, 6 months later, I'm having coffee. Me, Ange Martinelli, this young rookie kid just got out of the academy. He says, yeah, I see some son of a bitch doing rabbits. I'll blow his goddamn brains out and all that. And Ange is looking at him. Ange Martinelli, old timer, you know. My first shooting, he's the guy that rubbed my back because I was crying. Yeah. And he said, it's going to be okay, you know. And he told this kid, he said, you think that's cool? Huh? He said, yeah, I'd blow his brains out. He said, you think that's cool? He said, ask him how cool it is. It's bullshit. It's bravado. The first thing I thought of in my first shooting was, is God ever going to forgive me? And not being a Bible thumper. And I remember Ange Martinelli. I was sitting in the back of a police car, and he's rubbing my back. And he was a tough talking. Everything was out. You know, just a tough guy. And that night, he was like, "Hey, kiddo, it's going to be okay." He was like my dad that night, the dad that I never had. He was there for me. You know. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, shall we go back to your hobbies? Is there anything else?
Golf. Yeah, basically, yeah. And I learned the hard way how to build things, how to finish basements. I used to be from New York. You never owned a house, you know. But I'd go to work at night and say, okay, I did that. Now what do? They say, well, you got to put a floating wall in. I said, what the hell is a floating? It's where you put a 2x4 down, then you put 2x1s in between them, then you put another 2x4 on top. So what it does is the concrete heaves like they have bentonite in the soil here. It breaks those instead of your stud going through your floor upstairs.
Yeah.
And I refinished my own basement and stuff. And we had a pool table down there, and the boys, we used to have ping pong tournaments. I've still got that. My wife was a hell of a pool player and a hell of a she's a hell of a pool player. Being 5'9", she could lean over that table, and being a lefty, you know.
How about life lessons that you learned from the military or being a police officer?
Don't be late. Discipline. Value true friends. Always have somebody you can go and talk to, a buddy that understands. Because as a grown man, you're not supposed to cry. How much a lot of guys don't appreciate the woman that they have. And I had a young cop tell me one time, he says, he had 2 kids, refers to his wife as, yeah, the bitch this or the bitch that. And I got so tired of it, I grabbed him one day. I said, come here, I need to talk to you. Took him out in the hallway. And I got right in his face. I said, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? I said, you got a beautiful wife, you got a home, you got 2 little kids. I said, the bitch, I said, let me ask you something. I said, does she rub your back when you're puking, when you come home drunk? Is she the one that bandages your finger when you cut it? Is she the one that does the shopping, picks up the dry cleaning, makes sure that your bed is nice? You know what? When's the last time you bought her some flowers? You know what this idiot told me? He says, I give her plenty of money. She can buy her own flowers. I said, you poor dumb bastard. You don't get it, do you? I said, you know what? I said, if you take a rose once a week and put it on her pillow, it's going to cost you 50 cents because you're a cop. They'll give it to you for half price and put it on her pillow. So that woman will do anything for you in your life. I said, all you got to do, my wife loves carnations. When I go to Fort Logan, I put nothing but carnation. Roses, no, she never liked roses. Carnations. And at least once a month I'd stop by. Right at it's a marijuana place now, 52nd and Sheridan. And a cop's wife used to own. I used to go in there and get carnations and put it. And you know what? That just shows that you care about her and that she's the one that's doing the diapers and all that shit. You know, I couldn't change a diaper. I'd start puking. You know? Yeah, they didn't value their wife, or they fell in love with the waitress at the White Spot. I said, "Oh, good. You're 41, and now you're in love with that 22-year-old." I said, "Brilliant. Oh, you're going to start all over? What are you thinking? You know why? Because their brains go downstairs. That's why."
How long ago did you retire?
I retired in 2003. I left early because my wife was on dialysis. I left a year early. Because I figured she couldn't drive anymore, and I took her to dialysis 3 times a week at 5 in the morning, and she always had a routine. Right after, she'd always say, "Okay, let's go to McDonald's and get a egg McMuffin." And even the girls there that worked knew her, and they knew the day I showed up in a suit that she had passed, because I walked inside and sat down, and they looked at me, and when Mary, an older girl, come over, she said, "Oh no." I said, "Yeah." She chose to go though. She pulled her cards. I was giving her a shower just before she stopped dialysis, and she's pretty chesty, and I was giving her a shower, and I bought her this great little nylon thing you can sit on in the shower, and so I was drying her because she couldn't get her back. And anyway, and I'm drying her, and by her right boob, I said, "What the hell is that?" She said, "Don't worry about it." She called me Bucko all the time. "Don't worry about it, Bucko." I said, "What is that, babe?" She said, "It's probably a cancer thing." She said, "I'm not going to the doctor and letting them tell me I got cancer too." Because with everything else that she had, it just wasn't fair. And I thought, why? Anyway, make a long story short, a week later, she said, "I can't do this anymore. I can't. I fought the good fight, yada, yada, yada." And then both my boys, one in the Army, came home he was just getting ready to go to Iraq. And Tim came home and said, "Mom, you need to go on. No, it's not your time yet." She's only 61 and still a looker, still a great looking woman. And Dan said, "Mom, no," the lawyer said, "No, you're not going to do this." And she made a statement there that then they both understood. She said, "These last 9 years, I did this for you guys, all 3 of you." She said, "Do this for me."
That's absolutely.
I get it.
Absolutely.
My neighbor lady used to tell me, she said, "I miss Gretchen." And she's gone now, to an old Hungarian lady who had spent time in a detainee camp in Germany in World War II. And she said, "I miss Gretchen sitting out there reading her book and smoking a cigarette." I tried to get her to quit. And Doc said, "Brian, that's not going to kill her."
Oh. Was there anything that you were glad that you left behind with the military? You took a lot of things from it. I know you shared.
No. If I had to do my life all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. Because if I did change something, I wouldn't have met my wife. Yeah, I wouldn't have my boys. I wouldn't have my grandkids and my 5 great grandchildren. I wouldn't have them. It'd all be. That's why I say God closes one door, He opens another. Thank you, John Hamilton, for getting sick on the main gate in Denver in 1963.
What do you wish that more civilian people knew about the military?
about the decision they made to serve their country, to maybe make that sacrifice if it comes. But you bond, you make such a brotherhood that if you would have given your life for one of them, I'd give my life tomorrow for Bobby Pasco to be here. And my nephew got killed in Iraq. Got killed on his mom's birthday, July 22nd.
Oh my
Yeah, 101st. And they got hit. What were they doing? Going to practice at the range.
Oh.
Took an RPG through the good-looking kid too, Brett Thomas Christian.
Sorry to hear that. So a couple of things. What would you like people to remember about your journey, your military journey or your life journey? And what would you like to say to future generations?
I probably, a couple of guys from the police department have told me since I retired 20 years ago, they said, never work for a better guy than you, because I always had their back. I had a lawyer one night standing in the street in a neighborhood telling in the last 15 years I spent on a motorcycle, telling two of my guys, get out of my neighborhood, we don't want you up here. And they said, well, you don't have to say in it, sir. And they said, I want to talk to your supervisor. And it was Mikey Elbeck and Kenny Von Felt. And they both looked at this guy and said, no, you don't. You don't want to talk to Sergeant Deasy. No. So I got up there, and having a son as an attorney, I know what the grievance board is. I know how that works. And this guy was really out of line and pointing his finger. And I said, the first thing you do, sir, is take your finger out of my face. I said, I don't know who you think you're talking to. He said, you don't have this, you don't. And I said, let me tell you something. I said, you're standing in the street. There's a city ordinance against that. I said, it's called pedestrian in a roadway. He said, well, I don't want you in my effing neighborhood. And I said, well, you don't have a vote on that. And I said, stand up on the sidewalk, get out of the street. And he goes, you can't tell me what to do. I said, fine. Now you're under arrest. He said, no, I'll get up. I said, no, we already passed that option. Took the finger, wrist lock, handcuffed him, put him in jail. Long story, goes to court, walks up before Ted Soja, the judge, who was an old-time white-haired judge and just a great old man and a fair person. And he reads the arrest slip and he says, so-and-so, so-and-so. The guy says, yes, Your Honor. He said, you're an attorney? He said, yes, sir, I'm an officer of the court. He says, I can't believe you didn't get out of the street when Sergeant Deasy told you. He said, what is wrong with you? He said, these guys are up there because other citizens complain. He said, who do you think you are? And he says, Your Honor, I'd like to change my plea. He says, to what? He said, to guilty. He said, and I think you owe the sergeant an apology. He looks at me, he says, I apologize, Sergeant Deasy. I couldn't believe it. I thought, wow. But another kid I just ran into the credit union, I'm not bragging, but he said, oh my God, Sergeant Deasy, how are you? And this kid just got divorced, he's in a bad way. And I said, man, he said, do you remember the night you covered me on a thing on 38th Avenue? He said, and you pulled up and that guy had spit on the, and I said, I'm sorry, Mike, I don't. He said, I can't wait to tell my wife I just ran into the legend. He called me the legend. I said, I'm not a legend. He said, yeah, you are. He said, man, nobody messed with any of your troops. And they didn't. They didn't mess with my troop. You punch my troop, you're going down. This kid spit on my cop one night at a DUI. Then he comes over to me and he goes, fuck you, up my face. I said, oh, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I walked away. I worked up a good lunger. And I walked back and I went, hit him right in the eye. He says, I can't believe you did that. And my patrolman, Kevin Smoker, says, oh, sorry, that was great. I said, that's a little payback, pal, you asshole. Can't do that anymore. I wouldn't make it a day. After what I just saw this last deal where these poor cops are dead. 71 Denver policemen hurt during the George Floyd eruption thing in Denver. And they were using lacrosse sticks. A lot of people don't realize they were using lacrosse sticks to put boulders in, little rocks, and heave them a block. And they injured 71 Denver policemen. So they go to federal court and the jury gives them $11 million for their injuries from rubber bullets. It's how ridiculous. Anyway.
Well, I understand. So any other message for future generations? And is there anything else you would like to say for this interview?
Yes. When you work in Denver, you work in Queens, you work in Brooklyn, the Bronx, It doesn't matter. The badge is the badge. It's a brotherhood. But I would say over the last, and I come from that no father routine, that when the dad is not there, and be real honest, I could have been a convict. I could have been in prison the way my life was going with no father. And I look at Denver, I would say 95% of the homes, when I was a young detective handling burglars and burglaries, that those kids that were doing the burglaries, there's no father in the house. And what happens, they get to be 13 or 14, and they will get right in their mother's face, say, ain't no bitch gonna tell me what to do. And you could have 20 houses in a block, and if there were 18 marriages, I guarantee you in East Denver, 15 of them are separated, no father, no dad. And that's where the discipline would come from. Neither one of my boys, thank God, never been arrested, never been in jail, got their ass kicked a few times by daddy. One time, the little one made mama cry. I came home, yeah, that was a bad day. And I put my arms around her waist, and every day I came in, I kissed her on the neck, and she turned around, she was crying. I said, what is wrong? It shocked me. And about that time, I have vaulted ceilings. Tim came around the corner, and my wife said, that little asshole. And I said, you, and he took off. I kicked the door down, picked him up out of his bed, and put his head right through the sheetrock. Never forgot it. He's 57 years old, and he'll tell you that was a bad day. He used to tell his mom, him and his brother both, Mom, get upset, but please don't cry. Dad'll be home. Don't cry. They used to beg, don't cry. But they grew up with a mom and dad that cared for them. I loved them also. I mean, I worked 60 hours a week. There's nothing that either one of my boys needed to go to school. We saved $21,000 for each of them to go to college. And Tim didn't use it. He used it when he got married. Okay, fine. Dan, he used that. Then it was 10 grand. And this was cheap. This was many years ago at sea, but it was work extra. My wife decided one day, she said, I'm tired of being a housewife. I want to go to beauty school. I said, do it, sugar. She did. And she owned her own business, and red hair dye helped exacerbate her lupus. Is that crazy?
That's crazy.
A doctor told her that, her lupus doctor said, red hair dye. He said, it's terrible. He said, when you breathe those fumes in, it's kind of like the Agent Orange thing. I walk through it all the time when we do sweeps. I had no idea that the black dirt instead of the red dirt was because they sprayed it in the daytime with Agent Orange. I had no idea. That's what gave me the heart disease. That's what the doctor told me. Prostate cancer, that's what did that too. You know, I had that a couple of years ago, you know. Both my boys, I can never love all of them as much as I ever wanted to. Especially, I don't know why, but I love the boys. I mean, it's great to play basketball, but when you go in a room and you sit on the couch and little girls cuddle up to you, that's what makes grandpa, you know. Can I name them all? Yeah, okay. Lauren, Haley, Brian, Jesse, hold on, Dylan, Zach. Did I say Haley? I said Haley already. I'm missing somebody. Anyway, and the great grandkids I have are, wait a minute, Billy Faye. She's in North Carolina with Mama, with Haley. Charlotte Piper. She lives in Henderson, Colorado. They might be moving to Glenwood Springs. Zach, who my grandson lives in Towanda, Kansas, but his three boys are Rylan, Kaysen, and Grady. And Grady's the little redhead. To those greats, you got a good bloodline, and keep the shamrock going. Remember, you got a lot of Irish blood in you. Be proud, love your country, and love your mom and dad.
Thank you so much, Mr. Deasy.
Wow. That was fun, wasn't it? Yeah.